I'm Ann Abernethy, and this is Beyond Badass, How Fierce Women Get It Done. As a real estate broker here in Aspen, Colorado, I've had the good fortune to meet so many impressive and inspiring women, and I just thought their stories should be heard. The goal here is for all of us to learn together. Welcome to Beyond Badass, the podcast. I've got a great guest today. But before we get to that, if you're thinking about selling your house and you want to be really badass about it, where do you begin? How about right here? This is today's Fast Fix. So create space in your house, particularly in your closets. Let's just talk about that. Go into your closet. If you have different kinds of hangers, take everything off the hangers. Order hangers. You can get them on Amazon, you get them Bed Bath & Beyond, wherever, and hang everything individually. No double hanging. Create space between each hanger. And another good idea is to put dust covers on all your clothes that you really care about and hang all those together. I love color coding. I think that's great. And one suggestion I just can't forget is watch Tidying Up. Watch Marie Kondo's wonderful show on Netflix. That'll help. That's today's Fast Fix. Joining me now is a lady who is beyond badass. She is a fierce woman getting it done and has reinvented herself in many ways here in the Roaring Fork Valley. Her name is Lady Fuller, which just has to really define her, that very strong, powerful name. And she has all kinds of businesses around the idea of happiness, habits for happiness. So we're going to find out all about that today. Lady, welcome.
Oh,
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're a perfect guest for the show today. I'm really excited to have you here. And I know that your background started, don't you have a retail background?
I do have a retail background. I come from a retail family, actually. My aunt owned clothing stores in New Orleans, and my mother was a runway model, as was my father. And so in print, they were print models. So I do come from a background of retail. And in 2004, I started my first retail business after getting my MBA in San Francisco, and it was a blue jean store. It was a company called the Blues Jean Bar. And we served.
I know that company. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And
I remember
jeans in a sort of bar-like setting, and went to, opened about 13 or 14 stores over the course of 10 years, as well as had a sort of corporate gifting business that was tied to it. And we did blue jean box delivery, and it was quite the large business. And I sold that business on CNBC, actually, in 2015 on a show in front of 6 million people. That was exciting. And
what show?
On The Profit.
I love The Profit, Marcus Lemonis. Oh my gosh, you were on The Profit?
I was.
That's not even in your bio. I love that show.
Yeah, it's not in my bio. See, things you don't know about me. And then in 2016 restarted my gifting company, which had been operating under this other company in the retail form. And now I have a company that does corporate gifting called International Gifting Company. And that company is rehabbing sort of after COVID. It got pretty whacked, as you can imagine.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Large corporate incentive programs, mainly in Latin America, doing on-site gifting. So pretty much we were in the crosshairs of everything that could go wrong with travel and COVID and large groups and et cetera, et cetera. So
unbelievable. You've got this retail background, and I want to get to the happiness thing because, boy, is that a different thing. That is really a contrast from retail. But we've got to let the audience know about your name, because Lady Fuller sounds like you should be walking around with a tiara on your head.
Yeah, people always ask me about this. And it's funny, even I'll be at Starbucks and someone asks me if I'm royal, and I always say to them, I'm like, do you think if I was royal, I'd be at Starbucks ordering from you? No offense, but I'd be on my throne somewhere having somebody else do that. No, it's just a name. I am from New Orleans, Louisiana, where I'm presently here today visiting my father. And I was named after my mother, actually, who is the youngest of 5 girls. And she was Lady, and she was named, her sisters were named Greenie, Henny, Jenny, Sissy and Lady, and she was the littlest of the five, and therefore Southern name named Lady. And I was named after her. And then I was actually, for most of my formative years until about age 25, actually went by Lady Catherine. So it sounds even
Oh,
more.
oh my gosh.
Yes, I
That
was
is a
Lady
mouthful.
Catherine. And I dropped the Catherine when I moved to San Francisco, because at the time I was living with a girlfriend of mine from New Orleans named Mary Margaret. And
Oh my gosh.
nobody could handle the fact that it was Lady Catherine and Mary Margaret. So one time I walked out of, I think, a party out of the bathroom, and I was like, okay, I'm calling it, guys. I'm Lady. So therefore is my very unexciting name. Yeah,
Well,
or
it's a
exciting name.
beautiful,
Thank
beautiful
you.
name. And all those names in your mom's family, all those girls, it's so Southern. It's so New Orleans. It's so sort
It
of
is.
French and
It is.
very, very beautiful. So unbelievably, I did not know that you sold the Blue Jeans Bar to somebody on Marcus Lemonis's show. I love the
Yeah,
Prophet.
yeah.
But I mean, all this retail background and the international gifting thing for corporate America. Now, where did Habits for Happiness come
Come
from? And
from?
tell us
That's a
about
great
that.
question. So, in the summer, well, a year ago, summer of 2020, obviously we had survived this sort of first wave of quarantine and COVID. And I was really in this sort of reevaluation stage. I also got a divorce in early 2020 before COVID started. So it was a real time of
Oh,
transition for me. I have two young children. And I, have been a CEO of small businesses I've had a tech company in there somewhere for many years. And I always joke with people that I'm a recovering entrepreneur, right? Like this idea of like being a small business entrepreneur, it's amazing, but it's highs and lows and it's drama, and it's not a
mhm.
steady paycheck. And we'd gotten really whacked by COVID. And even though there was resources for us like the PPP and all of these things, and I've lived through 2008 with a pretty large business. I knew what these sort of extra forces were like, but I just kept thinking, it's time for me to, as sort of David Brooks, the pundit, always, has preached, to stand on my second mountain and find out what
Ooh.
makes me tick, right? If you like it, if you're a David Brooks fan. And so I felt like, okay, I really, so my mom, I was named after, died when I was 9 by suicide. So I thought, okay, I'm going to become a suicide prevention advocate. So I filmed a speech and I did all this. And then I realized, well, as wonderful as that was, nobody really wants to hear about suicide all that often. It's a prevalent and important and noble work, but it was really difficult for me to get audiences in the midst of COVID. Like nobody else wanted to hear about that. So
Right.
I thought, how can I get people way upstream? So I am on the Hope Center board in Aspen, of which Sandy, who's another guest on your show,
Sandy
is.
Eigelhart was here,
Yeah.
and we've got a whole show with her, and we have suicide in common in our family. And I have to tell you, we talked a lot about the stigma, and you just described it, right? Nobody really
Yeah.
wants to hear about it. So go on, but go on with your
Yeah, so
story.
nobody really wanted to hear about it. And so I thought, okay, and how can I affect change? So I'm very
Mhm.
clear that my life purpose is to spread light, right? So I knew that I've had all these experiences as CEO. I have wisdom in me from, losing companies, selling companies, having failed companies, and all this life experience I've had. And I thought, how am I going to get people upstream from suicide and be able to approach that same subject in a different way that I can affect change every single day on the ground? And so I immediately thought, well, I'd always thought about becoming a coach, but why not? It's the middle of COVID. Life's changed. I'm now single. All these things happened to me.
Mhm.
And we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's everybody's having this great realization. So I signed up for a coaching school, of which I'm still in, and a year and a half or so later, I'm getting a master's certificate in habit coaching, but I've gotten all these other life and health certificates and taking business courses in coaching. And I just, over the course, they, really were trying to convince me, okay, what kind of coach do you want to be? Right. So I thought, oh gosh, well, I really resonated with the idea of happiness, because I came kind of obsessed with this idea of happiness over the past 5, 6 years of, trying to find it myself. right?
Right.
And what I realized after years and years and years of looking for it is that it's not outside of us. I was taught, I grew up in New Orleans. I was surrounded by beautiful people, having runway model parents and beautiful things. And I was taught that if you work really hard, and you live in a big house and you have all the stuff you need and you have 2.5 kids and you marry the best looking guy in the room, that you will be happy. And I did actually all of those things. I found myself,
because we do what we're taught. We do
yeah,
what's modeled before us, right?
yeah. I mean, and I did all those things, and I actually found myself in my early 40s quite unhappy, which led me into this sort of like whole road of discovery, right? And so I did so much research, trying to figure out what it was that was making me unhappy. And I stopped drinking. I really just looked at all my habits. I went through all this sort of metaphorical and physical and metaphysical change. And I really did a lot of reading, because reading is a huge habit and of happiness for me. And the most poignant thing before I became a coach that I settled on in my reading was that the ancients that have been telling us for thousands of years, whether you want to quote the Tao Te Ching or the Bible or whatnot, that happiness lies inside of us. And somehow between then and now, I don't know, society's gotten a lot noisier, and we've lost this ability to access that place inside of us where happiness exists and lives. And I thought, that's what I want to teach other people. And how am I going to teach other people? And I'm so practical because, of course, I'm a business owner, and I'm kind of like, I'm a striver, get things done. I thought, well, we need to give people a way that's not just woo-woo happiness, like tips on how to get there. And if they can't find it, where is it? And so I thought, was just really stuck on this idea of habit change. And so I came up with this acronym, or this idea, Habits for Happiness, that we can access our personal happiness through focusing on the smallest common denominator. So the smallest steps. And what I often tell people is, how you show up in your day is how you show up in your life, because your life is just a collection of your days. So if we can focus on how we show up every day, and we can do one small thing every day that might be different from something we were doing before, we can actually curate this like amazing, awesome life. And the habits that I profess towards happiness are all free. They're all small things that most people aren't thinking about and aren't doing, and were not taught, but done in cum over time can lead us on this trajectory that's way past where we thought we could ever go.
Well, it's like the navigator on an airplane, right? You make a little tiny 1 degree shift, and it takes you a different place. You end up.
I mean, Iceland to Africa, different. Right?
That's right.
Like,
that's right. Yeah. So if somebody were coming to you to say, I mean, first of all, the thought came to me just as you were describing this, that really this is the simplest and timeless ideas throughout mankind, right? These are the simple things that it's all inside of you. You have everything you need. So that's timeless. But at the same time, as you were saying it, I thought, ooh, that's a big responsibility. You mean it's up to me? You mean I have to do it? This is really kind of scary now.
We love to blame others for our suffering, don't we?
We do.
We're addicted. I have a lot of coaching clients. I see big corporate groups too that I coach with. And I have the biggest common denominator that I always laugh about is us humans. We love suffering very much. I don't know if it's the hero's journey or something, but we're kind of addicted to it. So, this version, this generating happiness does then professes that we have agency over happiness, which is a burden, but it's also a gift, because we have to admit that we have no control over anyone else or anything except for our response to the universe. That's it. That's
our responsibility, right?
Yeah. I love wordplay. So that's our responsibility, is to respond to the world with grace and stand in our own truth, and to not react to it. And that's very counter-biological. It's counterintuitive, and it does place a big responsibility on us.
And how
Okay. So obviously now we know we have to do that. That's our charge, that to get to happiness, it's inside us. We have to find it. We have to access it. We have to open up to it. So, but you have habits for that.
Yeah, I
So
do.
tell me how to do it. I mean,
Yeah, so I mean,
give me
habit
the
change.
skeleton, the
Yeah, so I
rundown.
just interviewed for, I have a radio show on Voice America, and I just interviewed Gretchen Rubin this morning, and she's like my happiness guru and like hero. And she was talking about this idea that all of our habits are unique to us. So, right, look, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. But there are some baseline categories that work for everyone, right? As human
Great.
beings, as animals. So, I mean, a great place to start would be sleep. And most of us have pretty bad sleep habits. And how we have our sleep habits inside of the sort of overarching concept of sleep is unique to us, right? So, but most of us need a baseline of more than 5 hours of sleep.
Yes.
How much sleep we need is dependent on the person, and how we get that is dependent on us. But most people in America, I can't speak for other countries, are walking around sleep deprived, very sleep deprived. And we're driving sleep deprived, and we're making mistakes at work sleep deprived. We're making mistakes about thoughts about our life. And it's setting us back years on, taking years off our health, as well as creating a lot of drama and conflict in our life, because we're just tired and we're not thinking with all of our cognitive behaviors. And people say, well, I don't have enough time to sleep. And my argument is, you actually don't have enough time not to.
Not to.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. You've got to make that happen. The difference. And I really believe in little power naps too.
I'm a huge napper. So yeah,
I love little, but an hour is not good for me, but I can close my eyes. I can sit in a chair and close my eyes for 10 minutes and wake up like, okay, the day just started all over again.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. It also like resets your nervous system, right? It gets us at baseline. It increases your overall ability to have REM sleep, which is really wonderful and detoxifying for our brains. And naps are great. Not great for everyone, but it is a great way to honor and get enough sleep. So the second habit I would say for everyone is hydration. The vast majority of Americans are walking around very, 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 very dehydrated. And dehydration and sleep actually are two habits that if we don't do, we're less happy. So it sounds funny because no one really tells us this, but we're more moody and irritable and frustrated and hangry and all these things if we're not hydrated, and especially living, in all these places. Yeah. So it's so important that we're drinking enough water. So a habit that I say, for almost all my clients is, if you wake up first thing in the morning, I'll tell you about the next habit in a second that involves morning, is to drink 30 ounces of water.
Oof. That is a lot of water.
Okay. Yeah. So you wake up and you're the most dehydrated when you wake up in the morning, because your body does all this detoxifying at night. So think about a lot of us wake up and we have a habit of showering. So it's like an internal shower. It's like you're cleaning out your insides, you're replenishing. And just by doing that one habit of drinking the 30 ounces of water before you have coffee or tea or whatever and get your day started, you probably also move everything through your system. You will be happier because you're also halfway to your, depending on your weight. I don't know if you know this, that you have to drink, or supposed to drink half your body weight now, right, water a day. So you're halfway to, or I'm halfway in that case to my water goal for the day.
Wow, that's a lot. 30 ounces of water is like, ooh.
It's like a large Nalgene, right? So if you're in the mountains with the big top, and I just put a straw in it and I just drink it, and you actually don't realize how thirsty you are in the morning. So it's not that hard.
Great. Okay, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah,
That's my next thing. What's number 3?
Number 3 is movement. I think that most of us don't move enough. How we move is totally up to us. And some people like to walk and some people, but we're the only animals in nature that don't shake things off instinctively. So we, if you see a dog and he's frightened, he will shake, and they'll shake until they've got actually that somatic trauma out of them. And we as humans obviously have more trauma, human induced trauma, whatever, but we keep a lot of it in our bodies, which is somatic, and we don't move around enough to shake our emotions out of us. So you've heard that term, shake it off. So movement is actually good for your brain, and it allows us to be more creative. So you'll hear a lot of people talking about these walking meetings people are doing because they can think better. I have my clients walk when I talk with them a lot of the time so that they are sort of focused on just moving their bodies. I often tell people say, I have to sit at my desk, I have to return these emails. And I said, actually walking or moving is better for your work than sitting at your desk. You can probably solve a problem. Even if it's not just because of the calorie, sort of deficit you're creating, you also are creating such good energy and space in your brain for new ideas to come in. And those new ideas could solve a problem that would save you 3 years of sitting at your desk at work.
This is top of my list. The whole thing of shake it off and clear your head. Hiking, that's the head clearer for me every single day. And it's interesting, you are so onto something here, because all of the badass women that I've interviewed have a very, very similar morning routine. The ones who are accomplishing the most.
Next, morning routine. That was
right, morning routine, right? But everybody moves first. I mean, not everybody's drinking 30 ounces of water first, but yes. Okay. Morning routine.
Morning routine would be the next habit that I would say universally works for most everyone. And I'm not saying the morning routine has to be X, Y, and Z. I prescribe to Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning. It's a beautiful film on Amazon Prime. If anybody wants to watch it, he has like 10 bazillion books too. And he says that we should do silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and journaling every morning, which is a lot. But I think if you're only going to do 2 things in the morning, the first thing is, this is to sit in silence for 10 minutes. And that could be meditating, but it could be sitting by the window. And so I think that it's important for circadian rhythms, which is like all this new data is coming out about our circadian rhythms and how important they are, that we realize that the presence of light is really important to getting our day started. We are like flowers, we bud and
need to open up.
Yes. And so I think that sitting in silence for 10 minutes, 97% of Americans look at their phone within 1 minute of waking. And I don't think the phone actually should be in the bedroom at all. And I would say that looking at your phone within 1 minute of waking, I often joke, is asking a lot of people to come into your bedroom before you have your clothes on. So it's really not good for your brain, right? No. It's really not good for your brain. So don't look at social media or your phone no one's going to tell you won the lottery on your cell phone. It's never good news. So they're going to show up at your front door with one of those big checks. Right. But anyway, so don't look at your phone and sit in silence, drink your water during your silence, but have that 10 minutes to create a window of space between yourself and the day, right? So we only get one chance every morning to set the tone for our day. And if our entire life is just a collection of our days, then we get this chance to set the tone for our lives. And if we want to be in not reactive mode, then we need to be in a place where we have grounding silence in the beginning. And so this is probably one of the most important habits, I would say, that really makes people overarching. And I can use my clients as my sample. They all say that this specific habit makes them feel more content in their overall lives.
This makes so much sense to me. And for me, it would be, I don't know how many habits you have, but this would be the most difficult thing for me to do.
Yeah, you should try it and let me know how it goes.
Oh, I don't know. I'm totally going to try. I have to try it now, right? I can't not try.
But the thing is, like 10 minutes is not that long. You set a timer, preferably not on your phone. I have people use like a kitchen timer because we want to leave the phone in the bathroom. But the 10 minutes, it is the difference between having a frenetic, stressful day and having a day that flows.
And how do you do that with 2 little kids?
Well, you just wake up 10 minutes before they do.
Right. That's what, that's when the best work can get done. Yeah. I mean, when my kids were small.
Yeah. And we're already in so when we wake up, I don't know if you've ever laid in bed I'm sure you have, when you wake up and you're not fully awake yet, you're in what's called an that's why I say this wrong, agnostic state. And this state is sort of half awake, half asleep. And we're very connected in that space to whatever is greater. So our creative self, whatever it is, we download a lot of good ideas during that time.
Mhm.
Silence is just an extension of that, because that is where your intuition, your voice of wisdom, all of the solutions to all of your problems, it is in that space. So you
Well,
want
I
to
love that space because I think that space tells you, if you listen to it, that's like, if you can create that, this will be my challenge. But if you can create that, you can also then repeat it, right?
Yeah.
Put you in a creative
It puts you in a
space.
creative space. And so you can choose to sit longer, right? Like you're listening to your voice of wisdom, you're drinking your water, you're having a good time, you're solving the world's problems. But you get to choose. But it's really important that we honor our voice of wisdom and our voice of or intuition right then, because it is the best voice, but we cannot hear it in the craziness of our day. And yes, with practice and maybe with some napping, you could hear it more, but it is our greatest superpower. And so if we want to hone it, then we have to honor it.
I'm
and
sorry.
Give it some space. Yeah.
Well, I need to give you some space, but I'm so excited about this because the voice inside your head, the instinct that says, ooh, that didn't, I don't think that felt right.
we have multiple voices. Just to clarify, one of the things that I work on with all my clients pretty much across the board is overthinking. And so we do a lot of parts work, which is where we take the voice in their head, the mean one, and we disassociate from them, right? They're not the voice in their head, the mean voice in their head. Like I always say, if you met your self-critic on the street, like you would like punch it in the face, like you wouldn't have a drink with it. It's horrible. It's totally mean to you. Like you wouldn't be friends with it. And it's just a part of you that's trying to keep you safe, but it does say really nasty things to you. Well, we have other parts that are much nicer to us. And then we have the voice of intuition, or what I like to call the VOW, or voice of wisdom. And that voice of wisdom doesn't even like live in our head. It actually lives in our hearts. It's a much quieter voice, the one you describe. And that voice is the one that has all the answers that will ever be needed for everything that ever was. And it will also help us in work and in creativity. And that voice, you have to be quiet to hear it, because this, Sally and Ann, whoever those names you want to call them in your head, they're, Sally's like yelling at us. And so we can't, we can't hear this voice. And so we have to come up with strategies in our lives, and habits are one of them, where we can create enough silence to be able to hear it. I mean, like one of the things that I do is I don't watch TV. I like to read. And so I only have so much time in the day, but my intuition is my greatest superpower. And I think it is most people's, but I have to have a very quiet life so that I personally can access that place. And that's just the way I am wired. But, for me, it's important to protect that voice, because if I can't hear it, I mean, really things start to go real offline quickly.
In terms of other people, and you've navigated business very successfully. Maybe not always successfully.
No, not always.
No,
I've navigated business.
Okay, then let me ask you this. This is just to your point. So in navigating business unsuccessfully, at the time that was happening to you, were you not listening to your instinctive, intuitional voice of wisdom?
I think that, it's different times for different things. I mean, I have a much different approach in probably age, but I also have a much quieter life. And so when business things happen to me, I'm had a big business news with a lawsuit. It was, yesterday. And this is just something that happens in business. And I was laughing to a friend that, the 10 years ago me would have reactive and the world's ending and drama. And I was kind of like, we're going to wait and see. This will probably blow over. And by the time I went to bed last night, it completely blown over. And it was just because I didn't
Come
take
on.
this reactive thing. And I just sort of held it like holding sand. You want to hold sand with a sort of open hand versus clenching it and it falls through your fingers. And so this idea is that things, they pass through us. And if we want to hold on to them, then we can create drama out of them. If we want them to let them just keep going, we can just let them keep going. And our voice of wisdom mostly tells us that everything is going to be okay. Major spoiler alert, even though if right now sucks. And so the voice of wisdom, yeah, it's age. I think that sometimes when things haven't gone right for me, did I always react best? Probably wasn't in tune with my voice of wisdom. I'm much more in tune with it now. My voice of wisdom mainly tells me now to get out of my own damn way most of the time, and tells us that for most of us, we have to architect the life we want, and then we kind of have to get out of the way and let it unfold. And the hard part we have as humans, or I have, because I'm a striver, is trusting that God, source, universe, whatever, always has my back and will always unfold in the way it should. And when I put that trust in something greater, it always works out.
Interesting. Common theme with all these amazing women, where I find all these achievers, there's a common theme. So tell me how you deal with conflict in the context and framework of what you've just described to us.
Yeah. So I used to deal with conflict in a very sort of like win-lose mentality. And sometimes I can still get there because I'm quite competitive. And if you're a Stephen Covey fan, of which I am, he talks this idea of like win-win, like we should always be looking for this win-win. And he wrote, for people that don't know, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which in my world is like the Bible. But he talks about that we can always find a win-win, and we're kind of always looking for win-lose. And so the win-lose ends up being a lose-lose for both parties, because even though somebody wins, there's like this ensuing bloodbath and there's always a win-win. So what I do in my coaching, and I tell people this, and this is a really great tool for listeners, is that I tell everyone, look, you are on your map. Right. So your map of the world, like think of the life game board, like, the life game that's, with the guy going in the car with the little pins that
right,
children or whatever. So you have your life game board, and on your life game board, it's all the people, the things, experiences, people you've encountered, trauma, everything in your journey is on your game board, right? No one else has your map. Your map is unique to you, and you're standing on your map looking out at the rest of the world from your map. So everything you see is in context of your map. Now, everyone else has their own unique individual map. So they're standing on their maps, looking at you through their maps. Now, what gets us into trouble as human beings is we have this idea that everyone should live on our map and see everything from our map's perspective. Well, they can't, because it's impossible. They live on their map. They live on their life board. And so if we can understand conflict from this place that I'm on my map, you're on your map, like how can we bridge and how can we find a win-win between your map and my map so that we both win? And I think that's a different way of dealing with it, because it's not that your perspective is wrong, it's just different.
No, it is different. So how do you teach language skills for crucial conversations?
The thing I would just say is, like, and you may know this, I don't know if you've read that wonderful book, Fierce Conversations, but they talk a lot about this idea of always saying and, no buts. And this idea, and what I teach mainly, especially in relationship conflict, is that we have to say everything from I. So you live on your map. You can only speak about your map. You can't talk about their map. You never lived on their map. You don't have any idea what their map's like. And to assume that you do is an assumption, and it's wrong. That is wrong, because you can't live there. You haven't. And they can't assume that you can't assume that they know what your map's like either. So we can only talk from our own experience. So when you approach conflict and you only use the words I, and you are incapable of using the words you, I tell them you have to take the word you and throw it out the window, then you will find a win-win. But it's really hard to do that when you use the word you, because it puts the other person into defense. They back up to the edge of their map and they're putting up, armor. So, and that's just human behavior. So we have to use the word I only.
I know that you have a time restraint today, and I want to be respectful of that. I know you're trying to get on a plane. Is there any little tidbit that you think we should know that I haven't asked you that?
Yeah. I think the one thing is that, we talked about this a little bit when we were pre-talking, but, this idea of like being happy all the time, I don't know if that even exists. So I think that it's really important that listeners know, like, it's normal to feel all your emotions, right? So we're going to be happy sometimes, we're going to be sad sometimes, but the goal is not to be happier all the time. The goal is to be less bothered by the external things that happen outside of us.
Excellent.
Because once we realize that peace is synonymous with unbothered, which is somehow synonymous, at least in my definition, everyone's definition is different, with feeling happy and joyful and content and not having a storm raging inside of us, then I think then we have sort of achieved what we're here to achieve. And I think the way that we do that is by creating our own weather. So
brava.
Yeah. So if we create our own weather through our own habits, then one fun tidbit is other people want to be around us because we've got good weather. But then we also don't need to be anywhere else, because we don't need to travel somewhere else where the weather's better. Like here in this, chair where I'm sitting, the weather's pretty good.
I think this is fantastic. I love your habits. I'd love to hear all of them. I'm sure there are many, many more. But I can't let you go without a quote. Do you have a favorite quote?
Oh, I just always say, I sign off my radio show every Friday by saying the road to happiness is paved with healthy habits.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, listen, I hope that you enjoy your dad. And you have you've had a great trip there. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. I know this was a real time crunch. You were talking to somebody in Africa before you talked to me.
And spreading light all over the globe here.
It's inspirational what you're doing, and I'd love to hear more. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on habits, 4 happiness.com. You can also check out more of my projects on ladyfuller.com, FULLER. And feel free to shoot me an email, lady@ladyfuller.com, or reach out, check out my work. And you can always listen to me on Fridays on Voice America at 8 a.m. live every Friday.
Well, you're fantastic at it. Thank you for doing this. I'm so excited that we finally connected, lady. And I'll see you back home. I hope.
So bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and also that little bell icon next to it. That way you'll get notifications when a new episode drops. And I'd love it if you'd follow me at Inside Aspen on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And then the website's InsideAspen.com. I'm Ann Abernethy. See you next time.